Hey y'all, what's up and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a Bible study with me video on the book of Esther. Today we're going to be reading from Esther chapters 5 and 6, and it's going to be talking about preparing for what you pray for. And I want to kick this off by giving you guys a little bit of insight for me, what has really kind of helped me understand the concept on a personal level, that you have to prepare for what you pray for before you pray for it, but you also have to prepare for what you pray for, so that you are in a position where you can receive what you've prayed for. Because we often say, well, I prayed and I haven't heard from God, or I prayed about this and I prayed about that, or I prayed for this and I prayed for that, and I haven't received it yet. And the first thought that always comes up is like, God's not hearing me, he's not listening, or he's listening, but I don't even know if he's talking back to me. Am I even listening? And or sometimes we're even like, he's not going to give me what I prayed for, you know? So we like jump to all of these relational conclusions about how God feels about us based off of how he has or has not responded to our prayers, which in fact, he always responds to your prayer in some way. Okay. Even if it's silence, if that is the response, that is a response. Okay. And that's a response that you can actually do something with. It's almost like when you ask someone, if you've ever been in a situation where you ask someone, do you love me? They could say yes, that's a response. They could say no, that's a response. They could say nothing. That is a response. So it's the same thing, right? So I'm going to read chapter 5 and chapter 6 with you guys, and then we are going to go from there. And I am reading out of my boyfriend's New International Version Bible. I don't know what happened to my Bible. I'm over here reading this manly looking thing. Like, what are we doing? Okay, what are we doing? I have no idea where my Bible could have gone. Well, the one that I'm looking for, I have another one back here, but I want my life application study Bible. Okay, so Esther chapter 5 starts with Esther's request to the king. Now, if you don't know anything about the book of Esther, let me just give you a really quick preface. So King Xerxes, he is the king of Persia during this time period. And he was originally married to Vashti, I believe her name was. Let me not get this wrong. Yeah, he was married to Queen Vashti, and some stuff went down. Queen Vashti was no longer his queen. He dethroned her, and he put on a beauty contest. Literally, this is like probably the first recording of Miss America that we ever have in history. But he puts on a beauty contest to find a new queen. Esther wins that beauty contest. She becomes his new queen. She finds favor. So she gets put into that place. Now, Esther is not someone that comes from a royal bloodline. She's a regular, schmegular girl, okay? But she's pretty and she suits the position very well. And so she has risen to become queen. Now, Esther's mom and dad have passed away. They passed away before the story even started. But they passed away. Her guardian has been her uncle. Her uncle is Mordecai. Okay, that's her uncle. So Mordecai kind of like looks, he looks out for her. He is like her mentor. They have like a father-daughter relationship. So Mordecai overhears, one day he overhears a plot to kill the king. So he hears someone plotting to kill the king, King Xerxes, and he stops the plot to kill the king. Okay. So, and he's not rewarded for it, not just yet, right? He's not rewarded for it, but he stops the plot to kill the king. So he has a little bit of favor with the king too, right? A little bit. But the king doesn't know him personally or anything like that yet. All right. So we come to, chapter 5, right before we get to chapter 5, King Xerxes has a second hand man. So his right hand man, his name is Haman. Okay. Haman does not like Mordecai for whatever reason. Okay. It seems as though when I read this book that that Haman just doesn't like Mordecai because he's not afraid of him. Sometimes people just be threatened by you just being yourself. Like, and that's what this seems to be, right? Because they don't have any like real beef or anything like that. No family history with each other, none of that. But a lot of people are afraid of Haman. They, when they get around him, they're like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. They're like, yes, man, and all that kind of stuff. Mordecai's not like that. He's real chill. He's like, whatever, like it is what it is. Like he's not gonna act all crazy because you think you're a celebrity. And that makes that makes Haman angry when people don't react to him the way that he wants them to react. And some people are really like that, y'all. They really be like concerned when you are like relaxed and chill and have no idea they exist. Okay. And that's what's happening. So Mordecai is Jewish. Haman knows that he's Jewish. So Haman creates this plot to kill all the Jewish people. He says, you know what? If you're not going to give me attention and you're not going to treat me like everybody else treats me and puts me on a pedestal, I have favor with the king. I'm his second in command, and I'm going to have all your people killed. So Haman starts to put together this plot. Mordecai is aware. He becomes aware of this plot, and he goes to Esther and he says, Esther's Jewish too. Okay. So literally the queen is Jewish. And Mordecai goes to Esther and says, you have to save your people. Like, you have to step in, because if you don't step in, he's going to kill everybody. He's going to kill whoever is left of your family is going to die, because this crazy, boastful, prideful man who is full of himself feels like he has to prove a point. So you have to go to the king and have the king, call this whole thing off. Now, back in this time and age in Persia, you cannot repeal a law. Like how now we have laws, and well, I'm US based, but now we have laws, and laws can be repealed. Like someone can make a law that we can go back and change it and all that amendments and all that other kind of stuff. They didn't have that. If you made a law, there was no way you could take it back. You can put another law on top of it to go against the law that you previously said. But once you put the law out there, it's written, you cannot take it back. Okay. So they were really trying to figure out, like, how are we going to make this work? Like, we have to save the Jewish race. Okay. So that brings us to chapter 5. That's your like prefix as to where we are. So Esther chapter 5 verse 1 starts, and it says, on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. So Esther is aware of this plot that Haman has. She is aware that that Haman has put into works this law that is going to allow people to kill the Jewish people. But Esther says, you know what? I'm going to do what I can to make sure that my people are safe. And she starts by inviting them to a banquet. She's like, come have lunch with me tomorrow. Okay. And most people will be like, girl, we ain't got time to be having lunch. You talking about having lunch? All your whole family about to die, and thousands of other people. So in verse 5, it says, bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king asked Esther, now what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. So the king's like, this can't be what you wanted. What else do you want? He's used to people asking for like a lot of stuff, right? And so he's like, what do you really want? And then verse 7 says, Esther replied, my petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. So Esther says, at the lunch that she already prepared, she says, come to lunch again tomorrow. Come meet me again tomorrow. Okay. So we kind of see where this is going. She's buttering up the king. Okay. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into this when I share my observations with you. But she invites them to lunch again. Come back tomorrow. Okay. Now let's do a sidebar. So chapter 5, verse 9 talks about Haman. So Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was, oh no. There we go. He was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king again tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gates. So literally, like, he has no reason to hate this man other than the fact that he's not fearing in his presence, which is real cray cray. But some people are really like that. Verse 14 says, his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. So, of course, his little friends was like, oh, well, how about you have him killed? Get a pole, 50 cubits, which is 75 feet. A 75-foot pole. Go to the king, ask him to kill him, like to impale him on a pole. But tomorrow, just for tomorrow, go enjoy your lunch, whatever. That's what his friend's advice was. Then chapter 6 says, that night the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. Okay, so the king was like vaguely aware, apparently, but not very, right? He reads in the Chronicles. He's just going back and reading through his history because he can't sleep. And he's like, oh, I don't remember this, right? So in verse 3, it says, what honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, who is in the court? Okay, so he realizes nothing's been done, but then someone is standing outside the hall. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to talk to this person out in the hall first. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him what should be done for the man the king delights to honor. So as soon as Haman walks in, he doesn't even get a chance to talk about the poll because the king was just reading. And the king was like, well, Haman's here. Let me just ask Haman. He's my second right-hand man. So he says to him, what should I do for somebody who saved my life? He doesn't tell Haman who it is. He just says, what would you do? You know, he asked him. Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he's like, who are you even thinking that you about to do something for that's not me? Like, I'm your right-hand man. So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Then the king says, go at once, the king commanded Haman, get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So this is when it's revealed. And Haman's like, really? Like, I just bestowed this amazing honor to the guy who's sitting at the gates that I really like, that I wanted you to kill. But it's too late to take it back at this point, right? You got to do what the king says. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. When I read this, I got so excited because I'm like, it be the very people who doubt you, the very people who hate on you, your enemies that you may not even be aware of, that God will take them and use them to honor you for the things that you've done. It's a whole message, okay? A whole message. Verse 12 says, afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home. With his head covered in grief, he's sad, of course, and told Zeresh's wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So at this point, his wife and his friends is like, you ain't got no hope, homie. Like, it's over with. If he was honored in that way, like, this is the start of your downfall. He's going to replace you. The king's not going to want you there anymore. So that's chapter 5 and chapter 6. A very easy read. Esther is a very easy read as one of the books of the Bible. So let's get into this. I want to share a couple of observations with you from the scripture, and then I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can prepare for what you pray for. Okay. So the first thing I want to share with you that I observed is in chapter 4, verse 4. So chapter 4, verse 4 says, if it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. She wanted to show them that she valued them before making her full-on request. Most people will go straight to the person with power or straight to the person with influence and say, this is what I want. Can you give it to me or can you not give it to me? But that's not the way Esther did it. And she was smart to not do it that way, because he could have definitely said, nah, I don't feel like I want to do that, right? But she took a different route. She said, I'm going to nurture the relationship a little bit more. I'm going to build a little bit deeper of a bond before I go into partnership with you in order to make this thing work, right? Sometimes you have to win friends before you influence people. And if you are in business, you've probably heard of the book by Daniel Carnegie that's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. In that book, there are 6 ways that you can build deeper relationships with the people around you. Okay. And specifically, for me, it's a lot of what God is calling us to do are not things that we can do alone. And so we have to use our spiritual discernment to seek out who we need to partner with and collaborate with in order to make those things happen. And it requires you to actually build relationships, not just to come to a relationship and say, this is what I want. You know what I mean? And so that was a really big observation I wanted to share with you. And not just once, right? Because my next observation is this. In verse 7, she invited them to another banquet. So not just once, but twice she said, let's just sit down, let's eat. Like, she was deepening that relationship. She was building her influence. It doesn't matter if you're a business owner, if you have, social media accounts, you don't have social media accounts, anywhere that you go in this life, you are going to have to build influence in order to execute and carry out what God has called you to do, because there's always going to be an enemy. You may not even know them. Like, Mordecai had no idea Haman didn't like him. He didn't even know. He knew who he was, but he didn't know that Haman harbored this, horrible hate for him until he heard about the plan that was already set in motion to kill his entire race. And so just be aware that just because you have been called by God to do something does not mean that you're not going to have enemies. It does not mean that it's going to be easy to carry out, what you're being called to do. You're going to be covered by God, but you're going to need to make sure that you have those deeper relationships built, and you need to make sure that you have built influence that is going to allow you to do what you need to do. And that's what Esther was doing in this book, okay, in this chapter. And then the last observation I want to give for you for the story of Esther in chapter 5, chapter 6 is in chapter 6, verse 1, right? It's revealed to us that although Mordecai has saved the king's life in the past, the king forgot. Not only did the king forget that his life was saved, Mordecai was not even rewarded for that. He saved the man's life and was not rewarded at all. Okay, but it was written down. And so there are things that you may have done that were amazing things, miraculous things, and they might get forgotten. You might not get rewarded for them. They might go unnoticed, but they're going to be remembered at the right time. They're going to be brought to the light at the right time. Okay. You don't have to repeatedly boast and bring it up how Haman does, like all throughout this book, right? But sometimes there's a delay in the gratification for the things that you have done. And we see this a ton throughout the entire Bible. But just understand that if he would have been rewarded at the time that that happened, that reward would not have been as great as this reward that is about to happen, where he literally gets to save his entire people. He's working in partnership with Esther to save his entire people. Like, the delay in the gratification actually made the gratification bigger. Like, it came at the right time. Okay. So that's what we call delayed gratification. And I went and looked up, of course, y'all know I love the dictionary. I went and looked up the definition of gratification and the definition of gratuity. So when I looked up the definition of gratification, it told me reward or recompense, especially gratuity. And then I said, gratuity? Gratuity is what you give at a restaurant when it's too many people to serve and the person's running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Why are we talking about gratuity in the Bible? They wasn't even there yet. So then I looked at the definition of gratuity. And the dictionary, Webster's dictionary, defines gratuity as something given voluntarily or beyond obligation. And honestly, what I found is that delayed gratification is better than instant gratification. And so it's just better to do it without expecting. Because if you do it with expecting and then you don't receive when you thought you were going to, then you end up going on like this emotional roller coaster of like, well, I thought I was going to get this and that's not what happened. And literally, anxiety is like worrying about what you're going to receive in the future based off of what you have or have not done. Stress is feeling like you're doing more and receiving less than what you expected. Like all of these negative emotions that really take a hit to our mental health are based around like our expectations of what we're going to receive when we do things. And so it's better to just do what God's calling you to do just because he's calling you to do it. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you need to do in order to prepare for what you pray for. Number 1, identify who you need on your side in addition to God, right? So occasionally God's going to call you to do something that requires partnership. So who has the decision making or major influence been given to in your situation? Who has that been given to? How can you create a mutually beneficial relationship in order to carry out the assignment God is calling you to? Okay, take some folks to lunch, sit down with people, have a conversation, go grab the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It talks about showing genuine interest in other people's conversations, smiling, body language. Like it has a lot of stuff in there that you can use, right? But start to build relationships, because not only are you being called to do something and you need to do that, but there are things that those people a lot of times unexpectedly are going to pour into you that are going to help you. And you're going to be able to help them with some things, right? And so listen, 2024, I'm here for all mutually beneficial relationships. Okay. We don't get into relationships where it's leech. One person gives, the other person just takes, and that's it. Okay. Number 2, the second thing you need to do in order to prepare for what you prayed for is fast before you take action and enlist everyone who you can rely on to join you. What I forgot to tell you prior to chapter 5, literally the last thing prior to chapter 5, when Mordecai tells Esther, you need to go to the king and save your people. When he tells her that, she says, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to gather up all the Jewish that you know. And I need you guys to fast as a community for 3 days, no food, no water. That's what she tells him, because she knows that there is strength in prayer and fasting. And so she goes to him and says, everybody you can find that is Jewish. I mean, I need as many people as you can get. Okay. 3 days, no food, no water. On the third day is when she goes to the king and asks him to lunch. So that's where we started. All right. So same thing for you. Before you begin to prepare for what you pray for, fast. I cannot say this enough. Now you ain't got to do no Esther fast, because I have never done an Esther fast, and I don't even know if I'm physically capable of doing an Esther fast. I mean, I know I'm physically capable, but one day I'm going to look back at this video and be like, oh, I thought I was so weak. I definitely did one, right? One day I'll get there. But right now, I ain't got it, okay? But I can do like Daniel's fast. I can do sun up to sundown. I could do raw vegan. Like, I can do a lot of different fasts. But Esther is scary for me. So fast though, right? Because that is going to give you separation for elevation. It is going to give you a lot of clarity. It is also going to give you a heightened sense of spiritual discernment and ability to hear from the Holy Spirit. So fast first before you take action. And for even more power, enlist anyone who you can rely on to join you. Okay. Third thing you need to do in order to prepare for what you pray for is be ready to do what's uncomfortable and what may get you killed. It was a really big deal for Esther to go to the king and ask her to save her people. I mean, ask him to save her people. Like, seriously, y'all, she could have died for that. For a little bit in chapter 4 of the book of Esther, Mordecai and Esther are going back and forth. Like, Mordecai's like, you have to do this. And Esther's like, I can die. Like, this is a really big deal. And so be ready to do what's uncomfortable. Be ready to do what may get you killed. Be ready to take a risk, right? Be ready to take a risk to save people and to help people, you know, in a way that God has called you to. As a business coach and life coach, I often come across people who are scared to do things like share their testimonies, or they're scared to, you know, the Holy Spirit will tell them to talk to someone and they'll be scared to do that. Or, you know, they may feel like, oh, these are my people that I want to help, but they're scared to niche down. They don't want to leave anybody out. You're only responsible for doing what God has told you to do, to save the people he has called you to assist in saving, right? Because you're not a savior, he's a savior. But you're a tool that is a part of his rescue plan. And so you're only responsible for what he has called you to do. But it is oftentimes going to require you to do something big and do something scary, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. All right. So those are the 3 things you can do. I highly encourage you to go read the entire book of Esther. It's actually pretty short. So if you are not super familiar with the Bible or you're new to reading, I would definitely start with the book of Esther because it's like real juicy, but it's short. It's only 2 chapters. So that's all for today's Bible study with me. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Bye, y'all. See you later.